Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf. It's the beginning of September, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for my August tops and flops, a video series, if you're not familiar, in which I discuss the best and the worst books that I've read each month. And as always, we start with the tops and with the best reread. If you're following my channel, you know that in 2019 one of the goals I have is that I try to reread more books. So far it's not going badly, and the best reread of August was, without any doubt, Mary Doria Russell's sci-fi novel The Sparrow, first published in 1969. No, 1996. Get your numbers right. Um, and I talked about this book many, many times because it's one of my favorite novels, sci-fi novels for sure. And I reread this because it's part of was part of a group read. It's called the Lady Vaults. I will leave a link to the Goodreads group down below. This group was initiated by Elizabeth. I'll leave a link to her channel also down below. Elizabeth is a fantastic booktuber, and she reads a lot of sci-fi, and she decided to make this group in order to read more sci-fi by female authors. And the August pick was this book, and I thought that's the perfect opportunity to reread one of my favorites. The book is set between 2019. So if you haven't read it, perfect year now to read it, between 2019 and 2060. It opens in 2059 when the sole survivor of a mission to a foreign planet, alien planet, comes back mentally and physically broken. Emilio is his name. And then during the course of the book, we learn about the mission, the good intentions that these astronauts had, and why everything went terribly wrong. I think one of the brilliant things of this about this book is that it ages well, because, like I said, it was published in 1996, and sometimes with sci-fi, if you reread a sci-fi novel that is 20 or 20 plus years old, the technology or the theme just is a bit, laughable. But certainly not with this book. It's not techno-based, even though there is technology, for the spaceship and stuff like that. But it's a book about what happens if you encounter an alien culture, and the misunderstandings trying to learn their language and their culture, and how it just goes horribly, horribly wrong without either side having bad intentions. So I can highly recommend this book. It was a joy to reread it. It has a sequel, God's Children, which I liked. I didn't think it was as good as this one. But if you finish this book and you want to know, it offers closure to the reader, because every loose end that is left open in this book is neatly tied up in the second volume. But you don't need to read it. But this one, like I've said many, many times before, I can highly recommend. As always, the second book in my tops is the book that surprised me the most. And for this one, I picked a translated work of fiction, Yoko Ogawa's book, Memory Police, translated from the Japanese by Stephen Snyder, published this year in the English translation, originally published in Japan quite some time ago, 1995. This is a book, also a dystopian novel, set in a remote island, Japanese island, where where things start to disappear. Small things, like, for instance, roses or stamps, the stuff you put on letters, if you still know what that is. And those things start to disappear, and with it, the memory of the people of these things also disappear. The society is controlled by the memory police from the title, because there are some people in this society who won't lose the memory of a thing that has disappeared, and they are arrested, and you don't know what happens. The book follows an unnamed female narrator, a young writer, whose editor is one of those people who can't lose or doesn't lose his memory, and she hides him in her attic. And then plot ensues, more and more things start to disappear, and why the book surprised me so much is that the story, the plot, purely from a plot point of view, the book has really huge faults, in my opinion. To just give you one example, the narrator talks about things that have disappeared and her memory of them disappearing, which is not consistent with the premise, because once a thing disappears, she should forget that it even existed and that it disappeared. Because she's not, to make it clear, she's not one of those people who keep the memory. So there are these kind of huge inconsistencies in a plot. And normally, as you know, plot-oriented reader that I am, that always means if the book doesn't work for me and I don't like it. But not with this book. I saw the flaws and I saw the plot holes, but the imagination of this society and the lyrical language and the way the memory loss is described, I thought it was just so beautiful that I really liked the book despite the plot flaws. And the last pick in the tops, as always, is the book that I thought about the most after I read it. And this came as a surprise to me. It's this book, Underground Time, by French writer Delphine de Vigan, translated from the French by George Miller, published in the English translation in 2011 and in France originally in 2009. So it's a backlist book. And I read this as a buddy read with Terry from Miss Terry B. Leave a link to her channel down below. She's a really lovely booktuber who just recently came back from a longish hiatus on BookTube. So please check out her channel. But anyway, why I'm surprised that this book stuck with me, because it was not a 5-star read for me. It was a really good book, a 4-star read, but normally I expect a book to really stick with me, either because I hate it deeply or because it's a 5-star read. Sorry about the traffic noise on, city noises. But anyway, but the theme of the book somehow made it into my, drawer up there and came out. Anyway, the book is set in Paris, and we follow two main characters, Mathilde, who is a successful career woman working for a big firm, and Thibault, who is a doctor, an emergency doctor. The book goes back and forth between those two narratives, and it's one day that we see, but with a lot of back flashes to the past. So we learn that Mathilde, who was really happy in her job, she is a widow with 2 children, but then there was a fallout with her boss, and from that moment on, her boss slowly started to treat her really horribly and really cut her off. She doesn't get any work anymore. She's moved from her office to the basement, to a tiny room with no windows, stuff like that. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And Thibault, on this day, just broke up with his girlfriend, with whom he is very much in love, but she obviously doesn't love him. And so he deals with his attempt to come to terms with that breakup during his drives through Paris in his car to help emergency patients. The book is really about isolation, about people isolated in a big city, isolated like Mathilde by external means, through her boss, isolated from her work and her workers. And Thibault is so much in his own mind because of this breakup that he isolates himself from the people he meets, especially his patients. He is professionally engaged with them, but on a human level, he just doesn't care. And these the themes, especially Matilda's storyline, really kept me thinking about, work and city life and how you are connecting with people or you don't. So even though it wasn't a 5-star brilliant read for me, it is the book that I thought about the most in August. So those were my 3 tops for August, and then on to the part of the video that you're all waiting for, the flops. I didn't have a book that really angered me, but I have 2 books that deeply disappointed me. And the first one is a German work translated into English, Anne Richter, Distant Signs, translated by Douglas Irving and just published in February in the English translation, and the original German came out in 2013. I read this book in the German version, of course, because I'm German, Fremde Zeichen, together with Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventure as a buddy read. The book, I wanted to read this book, and Mel had the same, because it's about life in the former GDR, so the East German Republic, between 1960-ish and just after the fall of the wall, 1992. I mean, the fall of the wall was 1989, but the book ends in 1992. And we follow a family. Sonja, the daughter, her parents, Margaret and Hans, and the parents of the parents. So it's split into points of views from each of these protagonists, and the life after World War II, the life in communist Germany, the family dynamics, and this premise really drew me to the book because I wanted to read something about the former East German Republic. But for me and Mel, it was just a huge disappointment. I thought it's a debut novel, I should say, and I'm always a bit more inclined, to overlook flaws with a debut novel. But this one, for me, was just really bad. I didn't like the language at all. I thought it was kind of stuffy and trying too hard and a lot of cliche idioms and metaphors and images. So I didn't like that. But more importantly, I thought it was really boring. And it didn't give me any sense of life in East Germany. If I hadn't known that the book was set in East Germany, it could have been set anywhere in Germany. So the expectation and the goal that the book set for itself to give me an idea of how life was during the communist regime up to the fall of the war in East Germany, it didn't deliver at all. And like I said, in addition, it was boring, at least for me. So unfortunately, this book was just a big disappointment. And then the last book I want to talk to you about, the second in the flop category, and my biggest disappointment of August, probably also because I did not expect this book at all to disappoint me. So that really caught me off guard completely. And that's Maryse Condé's memoir, Tales from the Heart, translated from the French by Richard Philcox, published originally in 1999 and the English translation in 2001. Now, Maryse Condé is a Guadeloupe writer, and I shamefully had to admit that I had never read anything by her. And she was awarded the alternative Nobel Prize for Literature last year because, as you know, there was no real, quote-unquote, Nobel Prize for Literature. And I thought what I read about her and about her work, that sounded really interesting, and the shame on top that I had never read anything by her. So I picked up this memoir, Tales from the Heart, True Stories from Her Childhood, as the subtitle says. Sort of, it's not a memoir in one go, but it's short little snippets, pieces, vignettes about her childhood growing up, about her best friend and her parents. What can I tell you? This book, it was so, first of all, I thought it was badly written, but then maybe I can blame the translator for that, I thought. But it was also incredibly self-involved, and I mean, a memoir is always to a certain degree self-involved because you're talking about yourself. But there was the picture that arose from this person through the memoir was she is just so full of herself, shallow, petty. The relationship, the falling, she has a falling out with her best friend, the way this is taught, how she treated her best friend in school, and reflects on it now, not even with a sliver of doubt whether she, maybe she did something wrong. It was just horrible. It was really, really just horrible. Yeah, what can I say? If you read Maryse Condé, maybe you can recommend one of her novels to me. But for now, I'm just absolutely done with this writer. Anyway, so these were my tops and flops for August. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Talk to me down in the comments, especially if you have comments for one of the books that I mentioned. And I'll see you all soon in the next one. Bye-bye.